पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौ शान्तिर् दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौ शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvasadbuddhimapnotu, sarvasarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Asato ma satkamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya, aviravirmayeti, rudrayatte dakshinam mukham, tena mam pahi nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So welcome everyone. I hope you have had a good week. Today we will take a look at an important theme, something that all of us have experienced in our lives, and therefore we are grateful that Arjuna chose to ask this question. And Arjuna's question, put simply, is this: what makes people do things even when they don't want to do them? In the 36th verse, that's essentially what Arjuna is saying. We might speculate here. It's possible that Arjuna himself was passing through that situation. He had come to the battlefield to fight the war. And after reaching there, there's something a part of him wanted to do, which is why he had come to the battlefield. But then something within him was saying, no, don't do it. So what is it that makes us not want to do what a part of us wants to do? And what is it that makes us do things that a part of us doesn't want to do? In a verse that comes earlier in the same chapter, in verse 33, Krishna says, Prakritim yanti bhutani nigrahaha kim karishyati. Prakriti, that is nature. Nature is moving in one direction, it makes us want to do things. Nigraha means control. What can control do? We are being pushed by the tremendous force of nature around us. It's a little bit like, think about a flowing river, a river with a great flow. And there are lots of things being carried along with that current. Now, if those things are just things, not living things, they don't have much of a choice. They are just going to get carried by that current wherever the current takes them. But if there is a living entity in that current, that living entity has a choice. It can either refuse to offer any resistance and just get carried away like all other inanimate things, or it can make an effort to go against that flow. Now, it may not always succeed, but at least it has the freedom to make that effort. So, what it means is that those times in life when we feel we are helpless, that events and circumstances are dragging us in one direction, in a direction we don't want to go, we might feel, well, I'm just helpless, what can I do? And what the Gita will teach us again and again and again in many different ways is that no, we have a freedom to resist if we don't like what's happening. In fact, when Swami Vivekananda, during his wandering days, when he was passing through the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent, the area that in those days was called Rajputana, which corresponds largely to the state of Rajasthan today, one of the kings who met Swamiji, there were all plenty of small kingdoms in that area. So one of the kings asked Swamiji this question, what is life? And Swamiji said that the sign of life is that the ability of living things to resist. Nature is always trying to put us down, and we find a way out of it. Nature sends snow and cold, and then human beings say, we'll build enclosures, we'll have a heating system to protect ourselves. Nature says, I'm going to send you rain. And we got umbrellas, we got a raincoat. Essentially, nature is trying to send different kinds of challenges in our lives. And the history of civilizations, whatever we see as human progress, is nothing but bravely facing nature's challenges and overcome them. And that is the sign of life. If I stop resisting, then I am dead. I'm just like these lifeless things being carried away by this stream of nature. So that is essentially the Arjuna's question, that what is it that makes people do things even when they don't want to do them? What is it? What is that force that makes them do it? And Krishna, and I had asked you to read the subsequent verses till the end of the chapter, and Krishna makes it very clear that there are two things essentially why we do things we don't want to do. We will see in life that when we make mistakes, and of course all of us make mistakes, and that's to err is human. But how many of the mistakes that we do are mistakes done out of ignorance? If I do something wrong, did I do that thing without knowing that it is wrong? Or did I do that thing when I knew that was not the right thing to do? Because essentially we all want to do what is right. We all don't want to do what is wrong. And yet we find ourselves doing things in life that are not right, even when we know that they are not right. That is the question. What is it that makes me do? Because if we make a mistake out of ignorance, that's understandable, of course. And then when we learn something, we become wiser through that knowledge. But if I make a mistake, knowing that it is a mistake, that is not very human. I mean, to err is human, but to err again and again and again and make the same error again and again and again, that's not human. I think we would be insulting humanity or human nature to just say, well, that is human. No, I think we human beings are better than that. What we human beings can do, sure, we can make a mistake, maybe we make a mistake once again, maybe a few times, but eventually at some point we need to learn from our mistake. And learning from the mistake means I don't make that mistake again. Learning from the mistake means I may make fresh mistake, new mistakes, but not the old mistake. Because if I make the old mistake again, means I never learned anything from my mistake. And the tragedy is that most of us don't learn from our mistakes, which is why history repeats itself. And not just human beings, not just individuals. Nations don't learn from their mistakes. Civilizations don't learn from their mistakes. That's why not only our own life, if we look back, we will see that is the same kind of mistakes that we keep on making. If we look at the history of a nation, again we'll see periodically, and the span of these a national life is longer than an individual's life. But you will see again a same error. So you study Roman civilization and different civilizations throughout history, and well, clearly they are different, but in many respects they are also very similar, because essentially they're just human beings who are functioning in these different environments. And so Krishna here, in answer to Arjuna's question, mentions two things: Kama and Krodha. Kama is desire and Krodha is anger. So he said, these are the two things which is what make me do things I don't want to do. A part of me knows what is right, but desire and anger get in the way and make me do things that I regret, make me do things that I eventually suffer, which eventually bring me more suffering. Now, although it's clear Krishna is specifically mentioning by name two things, desire and anger, Kama and Krodha, they're not really two things. Krodha, anger, can be seen as a desire that is obstructed. I want something and there is some obstruction in the way and I get mad, I get angry. So we could look upon anger as just an offshoot of desire. Which is why, if you look at the last verse in this third chapter, verse 43, Krishna refers to the two as in singular, that enemy. And he says it's the desire that is the enemy. there is a word that is very important there. He says kama rupam. Kama rupam means that a desire need not always come or need not always become tangible to us in the form of desire. Desire can take many different forms. Sometimes we will see that the human mind is a very interesting thing. Sometimes we desire something, a part of us knows that that desire is not appropriate, and the mind then has a way of telling me, oh no, that's not a desire, that's blah blah blah, that's this. So the mind has a way of justifying, and a mind is like a lawyer, think about it this way. And there are good lawyers and there are bad lawyers. And I don't know how far this analogy will go, but look at it this way. If you want somebody to plead your case, you want a lawyer who is on your side. You wouldn't want to go and take advice from a lawyer who is really your enemy, because that enemy might appear to you as a friend, seem to give you an advice which might seem logical, but which is not in your interest. Now, why did I speak about a good lawyer and a bad lawyer, or a friendly lawyer or an unfriendly lawyer? Is because the mind can take both these roles. Mind it can be my friend, the mind can be my enemy. That is what Krishna says in the Gita. That when my own mind is my own enemy, then that mind will try to justify everything for me. No matter what I do, no matter what I think, my mind will say, that's a great thing, that's wonderful, that's a great, and even if a part of me still says, no, that wasn't wrong, that was wrong, the mind will say, oh, no, don't worry, that's fine, that was right. But a mind that is a friend, that mind will call a spade a spade. That mind will, if it finds that I'm doing something right, the mind will say that is right. If the mind finds that I'm doing something wrong, I'm thinking something in a wrong way, the mind will tell me so. And that is what good friends do. How would you distinguish between a good friend and just an acquaintance and an enemy? And one way would be, an enemy, it doesn't necessarily always mean that if an enemy comes to me in the form of an enemy, I think that's great. That's easy to deal with enemies who don't hide the fact that they're enemies. But if an enemy comes to me in the form of a friend, if an enemy comes to me pretending that they have my own welfare at their heart, and I'm not able to recognize that enemy, then I'm in deep trouble. Because I'll be given a bad advice, and I will think that is good, and I will get into trouble. Now, that is what my mind can do. If it is not really my friend, but pretending to be my friend, it will tell me what is not in my interest. On the other hand, a good friend would not hesitate to tell me I'm wrong, even if it makes me feel bad. And that's the difference between simply a casual acquaintance and a friend. Sometimes you might see someone doing wrong, and you'd say, well, I don't want to go and interfere. I don't want to, if I point out the mistake to that person will be hurt. I don't want to hurt that person. Let someone else do it. But a true friend would be, no, that person is my friend, and I must go and alert that person. I must tell that person this is wrong, even if that my friend becomes mad at me, even if that my friend gets upset at me, I will still go and tell that. So our mind can be a friend or a mind can be an enemy. And that is what Krishna points out. And so therefore, this desire can take many different forms. One other important point to remember here is that, as I've said on many earlier occasions, desire sometimes gets demonized a lot in religious literature. Desire means bad. I think that's a very extreme view. I think it's more helpful to see that certain kinds of desires are good, okay. In fact, Krishna himself, in the 7th chapter of the Gita, if you look up chapter 7, verse 11, Krishna says, Dharma viruddho kamosmi. Dharma aviruddho kamosmi. Dharma, we spoke a lot about dharma last week. Aviruddha means unopposed. So a desire that is unopposed to dharma, a desire that is in harmony with what is right, with what is good, that desire is great. Now, for instance, if we say all desire is bad, then what about a desire to pray more intensely, a desire to meditate, a desire to go and help people who are in need, a desire to learn more about spiritual life, a desire to study the Gita? That's not a bad desire. That's why Krishna says, desire not opposed to dharma, which is not contrary to dharma, is a good desire. So that's an important point to remember. But all other kinds of desires, the desire that takes me away from my spiritual ideal, that is a problem. That is what pushes me in a direction I don't want to go. Now, what is the origin of desire? We might say, where did this desire come from? Why did God put desire in our heart in the first place? If that had not been done, then we wouldn't have had this problem with desire at all. Mark Twain once wrote in one of his books that God did not know human psychology. And he says that because he said when we have the story of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and how there was this forbidden tree, they were asked to not eat any fruits of that tree, and of course they ate that apple, and then the original sin and so on. So we have all this story. So Mark Twain says that Adam did not eat the apple for the sake of the apple. Adam ate the apple because he was told not to eat it. That's human nature. You tell someone not to do it, and that's the first thing they would want to do. And so he said, if all this problem is created by the serpent in the biblical story, then if God had only told Adam, don't eat the serpent, the problem would have been solved. Sometimes, many of these writings, and Mark Twain certainly, they are witty, they are funny, but they are also conveying a deeper truth. So the excuse, what can we do? God put desire in our heart, and now as if we have no option. Vedanta looks at it in a different way. Vedanta's understanding of the origin of desire is this, that our true nature, we are infinite, and an infinite can only be one. There cannot be two infinites because they would limit each other. And so because there is this one existence which is all-pervading and infinite, and of course there was no desire, there was nothing. what can be? There's just oneness everywhere. And then, at some point, the only way that infinite can become finite, first of all, an infinite cannot become finite. If it is infinite, it's always infinite, if it's really infinite. The only way it can become infinite, it can become finite, is if it forgets that I'm infinite. That's the only way. It's like if something is real, that something which is real can never become unreal. And if something is unreal, that can never become real. In other words, if something is real, it is necessarily eternal. That's the Vedantic approach. There is no such thing as a temporary reality. There is no such thing as saying, well, that's real, but it's real only for 2 hours. Well, if it's real only for 2 hours, then why call it real? In fact, the reason why we dismiss dreams as unreal, the dream world as unreal, is because they don't last. A single night, I might be sleeping for a few hours, and within that I see dreams. And no matter how real they appear while I'm dreaming them, when I wake up in the morning, if I'm still sane enough, I will have no illusion about, oh, that was not real, because it didn't last. Relatively speaking, comparatively speaking, this world appears to be more real than the dream world because it seems to last. It persists. So, if my infinite nature is real, it is eternal. So the only way something that is infinite can become finite is if it falls asleep and forgets that it is the infinite. So that's the scenario. So Brahman alone, the infinite being alone, existed all through eternity. And then we can speculate. Suppose, now Brahman never goes to sleep, but now because we go to sleep, we know what happens when we sleep. So with our own little minds, based on our own daily experience, why not speculate? What would happen if Brahman were to go to sleep? Nothing particularly more different than what happens to us. When I go to sleep, I forget who I am. When Brahman goes to sleep, Brahman forgets that I am Brahman. Now, if Brahman forgets that I am Brahman, means Brahman, who is infinite, forgets that I am infinite. When it forgets that it is infinite, it becomes finite. Now, once something which was all-pervading has become small, then it begins to perceive. There is a lot more space available now where other things can be. So once Brahman becomes finite, and that becoming finite means I become identified with something much smaller, then my sense of I-ness with that small thing already creates a duality. Because if this little thing is me, everything other than this is not me. And then I begin to see a lot of other things. But the memory of being that infinite never quite leaves us, even when we forget. And so, this Brahman who is finite, who feels a sense of incompleteness and unfulfillment, wants to become full again, wants to become complete again. The word for completeness means purna. So that which was purna now has become opposite, apurna. And now it wants to fulfillment. And then this incomplete being feels, If I can only have this, then I will feel complete. And I try to get it and I feel, oh yeah, I feel some amount of happiness as a result of getting this, but I don't feel complete yet. And then I look at something, oh, if I can have that, that will make me happy. And that's essentially how our life is. We keep running after objects, after people, after places, after things, all with the idea that somehow this will make me complete, this will make me full, and I will be happy. But no matter how many things and people and objects outside of me I try to accumulate and try to make them my own, that emptiness never quite goes away. Houston Smith, the great scholar and practitioner as well, he once said, it's a very favorite quote of his that I like. He said, every one of us has a God-shaped hole in our heart. And because it is God-shaped, only God can fill it. And I try to fill that with all these other things, they never fully fit. There's always that gaping hole there. And so that is the origin of desire, according to Vedanta. That of infinite becomes finite, then looks at the other things in this universe and tries to become full. Desires them because the feeling that only if I get that will I be able to regain my own infinite nature. In the second chapter, in verses 62 and 63, which are very often quoted, Krishna describes a chain reaction. That none of these things can be taken in isolation, whether it's desire or anger. In fact, it's an inexorable chain. That chain can be broken at any stage, but for that we have to be aware, we have to be conscious, we have to be alert. If we look at our lives, we might discover to our horror that we are not as alert as we think we are. In fact, when we wake up in the morning, we just feel, oh, here's another day before me. And then once we get into our daily routine, and then one thing after another keeps coming up. Oh, I've got to finish this. I've got to do that. I've got to do that. Call this, email this, texts, phone calls. I've got to go and do a grocery, buy this. So there are unending demands on our time and energy from many different directions. And then suddenly the day passes, it's become evening, and it's time for dinner again. You thought, oh, I just did my breakfast. And suddenly now it's time for dinner and time to go to sleep again. And we might ask how much alert I was in that day. And don't be shocked if you find that we were hardly ever alert. Everything can become mechanical in life. You can drive through a busy street, and we all agree that, a good driving means being alert. But even the best of drivers, they can drive perfectly well, because once it kind of just becomes our second nature, people are not alert even while driving. And it's not as if every time you're not alert, there's going to be an accident. Of course, it once the boundary is reached, once you kind of cross the limit, and lack of alertness at the wrong time in the wrong place can lead to very sad results. But otherwise, when people drive, they're listening to music, they are carrying on conversation, sadly even texting, and they seem to be doing fine. Not that this is right to do it, but once we get used to doing some things, people are able to do them. Even a japa and meditation can become mechanical. You might think, oh, I sat for an hour today and I did so much japa. But even through all of that, if it has fallen into a part of your daily routine, it's possible to keep on doing one spiritual practice as a matter of habit and not be alert. And that's why, while you have a good routine and you keep on doing things, if there is no alertness, there is not much difference between training a machine to do something. I mean, why should I have to do it if I'm not being alert? So if I'm saying my prayers or if I'm doing my japa without alertness, I might as well have some tape recorder saying that prayer. What difference would it make? So the chain reaction is simple. First, we look out. That's what, when I'm finite, when you wake up in the morning, every time we open our eyes, we see a host of things around us and we respond to them. All our senses respond to things around us. All the sight, sound, smell, touch, we are responding. And most of the things, we just see them, we acknowledge their presence. It's not as if everything I have to either like or dislike. Most of the things are just there. But among the things we respond to, beyond merely acknowledging their presence, is either we are favorably disposed to some things or unfavorably disposed to other things. So either we like something, and if we like something, we want it. Or I might respond with the intense dislike or hatred, and I want to throw it away or run away from it. Now, either way, when I respond, when I react, I'm getting attached to it. Sometimes we make the mistake of thinking attachment simply means liking. Actually, no. Intense hatred is also an attachment. I'm attached to something through my hatred. I'm attached to something through my dislike. So we need a more refined understanding of what attachment is. So when I feel attached to something, and if it is something that I am favorably disposed towards, the next thing I want is I want it. There is a desire. So if it is favorable, I want it. If it's unfavorable, I want to throw it away or I want to run away from it. Either way, attachment leads to desire. Now, if desire, as we saw before, if there is an obstruction in the fulfillment of my desire, then there are one of two reactions. If that obstruction is huge, if that obstruction is beyond my ability to remove, then I won't actually get angry. I'm just going to suffer. I'm just going to get upset. I'm just going to get frustrated. It's like you have a plan to go out somewhere. Let's say sometime in January or February, when there is winter is upon us, and you decided, oh, this evening I want to go somewhere. And then suddenly, although it was not forecast, there's suddenly a huge storm, or there is a snow, or whatever, something happens, some natural thing, or another earthquake. And of course, you can't go. You wanted to go somewhere, you can't go. Now, in that situation, you don't really get angry. I mean, what's the point in getting angry with nature? It's pointless. Nobody gets angry with, well, people do. People can get angry with anything. But generally, when the obstruction is something you cannot do anything about, people get frustrated. People get upset. People suffer. But if there is an obstruction which I can react to, maybe some person is standing in the way of my fulfilling a desire, I'll get angry with that person. If there is something that I am able to deal with, then anger is the next thing that happens. And once anger takes hold upon us, then we get delusion, moha. That means we lose control. As long as we are alert, we are in control. But once anger overtakes us, we are no longer in control. You can see, again, what alertness can do is it can draw my attention even to these initial stages of anger or irritation. It's like this: suppose you are in a group, there's a conversation going on, and there is a certain person who is being extremely offensive, or and you, if you are alert at that point, you know that you are getting irritated. You become aware of your irritation in your heart. You may also become aware that this person is making me mad. I am getting angry now. As long as you are aware all these things are happening within you, you are still under control. But at some point, that alertness goes away. Then I'm no longer aware that I'm angry. I become my own anger. So it's not that I'm angry. This whole being becomes anger itself, anger personified. So once I lose control over myself, once anger takes control of me, then I may say terrible things. I may go and start a fight. I may start quarreling. And at that point, I have no idea what I'm saying. I have no idea what I'm doing. And then eventually, when calm returns, and then I might then regret. Usually people do regret. And they say, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. Now, why did I say something I didn't want to say? Why did I do something I didn't want to do? Because I lost control. And I lost control because I was not alert at that moment. So that's how this delusion, I get deluded, alertness goes away. And that leads to loss, what Gita, what Krishna calls smriti bhramshaha. Smriti means memory. Bhramshaha means destruction. So smriti bhramshaha means loss of memory, the memory getting destroyed. Now, memory of what? Memory of what is right and what is wrong. So once I forget what is right and what is wrong, it leads to what Krishna calls buddhi nasha. Buddhi nasha means a loss of discernment, my inability to make the right choice. Because once I forget what is right and what is wrong, how can I choose what is right? Because my memory has been lost. And when that happens, then we remain stuck in samsara. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. The person is destroyed. That's the word. Now clearly, there is no eternal damnation in Vedantic understanding. There is no place called hell where you have to rot eternally. So pranashyati really means we remain stuck in this inexorable wheel of samsara. We can try again. And if we fail again, we'll continue going around samsara. But if we keep on trying without losing our heart, we can get out of this circle of samsara. And how do we do that? And then Krishna describes it in the very last verse of the 3rd chapter. If you look at it, he says, that is verse number 43. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanamatmana jahishatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Thus knowing him who is superior to the intellect and restraining the self by the self, destroy, O mighty arm, that enemy, the unseizable foe, desire. You see, I said, he refers to this two, what he first began with saying as two, desire and anger. Then it becomes singular, this enemy, because anger is just an offshoot of desire. And how do we do that? Restraining the self by the self, atmanam atmana, that is this awakened buddhi, this alertness, the mind that is alert should try to get the other part of my mind which is not alert. So the mind, sometimes we try to think about our mind as one kind of a monolithic whole. It is not. One of the problems of human existence that there are these multiple divisions that have taken place. I mean, just think about it. There's this one infinite being that got divided. Apparent. Everything is apparently, because really nothing has happened. But because we don't know that is apparent, it appears real to us right now. So this one infinite being now has become I, and this not I. And not I means this infinite universe with hundreds and billions and trillions and gazillion things and objects and peoples. It's an extremely diverse, multifarious universe in which we live. Now, further division has taken place. We human beings are good at these categorizations. So we say, this is living, this is not living. Among the living, these are plants, these are animals, these are human beings. Now, within human beings, again, there is the body, there is the mind, there is the intellect. Within the mind, then, we say there is the ego. And then within the mind, we make further distinctions, saying this is the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. So you can see how many divisions and subdivisions have occurred. So the conscious part of us, that part which is aware, which is alert, that part of the mind has to now lift up this other dead weight of this unconscious part. Our mind is a huge treasure house of things that are very valuable and things that are just trash. It's a mixture. Most of this mixture is in the basement of our mind, and we haven't gone there for a long, long time. So what you and I know about our minds is only a tiny part of the mind. So our awareness of our mind is of a very small part of our mind. Most of our mind, perhaps more than 90% or 95% of the mind, is the basement, about which we know nothing. Only occasionally, things might seem to just bubble up from the basement. And then we are sometimes surprised ourselves of the kind of thoughts that we think. See? And we might, if we are honest, we would say, where did that idea come from? Where did that thought come from? Where did that desire come from? And we invariably try to look outside and say, because of this, because of that. But most of the time, it's really because of what's in my own mental basement. So all of those things are here. Now, if we need at some point to go into our basement to find out what things are there, because it's not all trash. There are some very positive, strong, helpful things which are there, and I need them. So only if I go with a big flashlight into my basement and shine a light and say, okay, oh, here is this wonderful thing, I like it, let me take it. And that is the time we see some great things we may have learnt in life, great lessons that we may have received earlier on in our life, but because we got busy with many other things, it just remained buried and we didn't know about it. It's like, actually, people don't even forget about basement. A lot of time you look at people's desks. So here is the mail comes or something comes, and you say, I'll take care of it later. And then something else comes next day and you put it on top of that. And something else comes on next day and your desk starts piling up. Afterwards, you have no idea what's at the bottom. You've forgotten about it. And that's what has happened in us. So great things have come, but they have gotten buried. So alertness means not being simply alert of my mind right now, but at some point acquiring the ability to shine the light. And that's what meditation, reflection, self-introspection, even prayer, all of these things, directly or indirectly, will help me get to know myself, get to know my own mind. So that alert part of my mind has to now lift up. That's what Krishna means. How the one part of the mind has to lift the other part. And when there is no more any basement. I've cleared my basement fully. I know exactly what things to keep, what things to trash. And once I'm able to do that, throw away all the trash, use all the good things, be fully aware, fully alert, then I will never, ever be forced to do things that I don't like. I'll be always able to make the right choice because I'm seeing things clearly. My memory is no more lost. And that's what Krishna wants Arjuna to do. The very fact that Arjuna, after going to the battlefield, was like, I don't want to fight, something had gotten wrong. He wasn't able to know what is right for him in that situation, what is wrong for him. That alertness was lost. And so all the teaching that Krishna is giving Arjuna now is showing him a way of how to be alert and how to not give way to desire and anger. Because if these overpower me, I will not be able to do what is right in life. So that's a big lesson that we get through this reflection about looking upon what role desire plays in our life, whether it is helping me bring greater joy in my life, or the desires are really creating greater anxiety, stress, and worry. And it's not worth it then. If the little bit of, if it's like 5 minutes of joy and then 5 hours of anxiety and worry, you just do the cost analysis. It's not worth it. So that's what we need to do. That's what self-reflection means. In fact, as I sometimes say, just if you find it helpful, make a list of all the things you desire in life. And then, again, maybe a day or two later, look at that list and see which of those things you really need, which of those things you really cannot do without. Ask yourself, which of these things, how much joy are they going to bring me, and how much stress and worry and anxiety are they going to bring? And ask yourself whether it is worth pursuing that desire. And you don't have to deal with that list just one day. Keep that list somewhere. Keep it somewhere where others cannot see it. Only you don't have to share it with anyone. So, but you know what those things are. And then look at those things periodically. And what we will discover is that the shorter that list gets, the happier you will be. And the happiest person in the world would be to say, I look at this paper and say, oh, my list, there is not a single item here. Now, does that mean I'm not going to be happy? On the contrary, I'll be the happiest person. What it means is, I then become just an instrument in the hands of God. That whatever, if we have that faith, if we have that conviction that God loves me, and then whatever God gives me is for my good. If it is for my good, it will come to me. If it is not for my good, it will not come to me. And a devotee would say, even if something that comes in my life that really it brings pain to me, an ordinary devotee would get upset with God. God, can't you see I'm suffering? Can't you do something about it? And that's a very natural human reaction. But a devotee who has reached a higher level of devotion will say, God, I don't understand why you're giving this to me, but I have faith that even through these troubles, even through this pain, you are doing something good to me. Right now I can't see how it is helping me, but I have faith that when I look back at this phase of my life, after 6 months or a year or whenever, I will look back and say, thank God I had all these troubles, because now I have become better, I have become stronger. In some way, it's a blessing in disguise. Of course, we would sometimes be happy to have blessings which are not in disguise. I mean, if God only sends out saying blessing, but all in disguise, then it can maybe a little tough. But it never happens. We will see in our life, there are a lot of blessings which come as blessings. But there are a lot of other blessings which come in disguise. A devotee sees everything that happens as the will of God and as an act of love for God. But there is a lot more about bhakti that we will discuss going forward. But today, let's keep it restricted to just the role of desire and anger in our life. So we'll take a 5-minute break now, and then we will have questions and answers. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. So thank you for all the questions. Let's take a look at them. How to reconcile these two things? Fulfilling desires is like adding fuel to the fire, and one cannot get taste for spirituality until all desires are fulfilled. I don't think that all desires need to be fulfilled in order to get taste for spirituality, because desires are not a fixed quantity. As you say, it's like adding fuel to the fire. The more you add fuel to the fire, the brighter the fire is going to be. So if we wait for all desires to be fulfilled before turning to spirituality, we will never turn to spirituality. There is a Sanskrit saying which says it is like a person going to the seashore and say that I'm going to go into the sea and take a dip only when the waves will stop. That's never going to happen. So at some point, we'll have to use discernment, viveka, to see, as I said, see which desires are necessary or which desires are not. But also, as Sri Ramakrishna taught, we need to turn the direction. So if my desires are now taking me towards the world, I can use that energy of desires to say, instead of desiring this or that, let me desire God. So if I can change the direction of my desires to something that will take me nearer to my spiritual goal, then it is possible. Did time start when infinite started thinking it is finite? Does time vanish when it again gets to know it is finite? Yes, I mean, you could say that. Time is as much a product of ignorance as this world is. So time started, you could say that, but it doesn't feel like the beginning then. By that I mean, think about it this way. Suppose you go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, and then within 15 minutes, you are fast asleep. And then say after 20 minutes, you start dreaming. So let's say it's about 11:35 when your dream starts. Now by 11:40, your dream world is 5 minutes old, because your dream world was created only 5 minutes earlier. So you could say the time of your dream world started when you started dreaming. But when you are in the dream world, the world doesn't appear like, oh, this was created only 5 minutes ago. The world will appear to have been there always. So to say that time started there is not to think in terms of zero time and then starting. But yes, time as an entity did emerge after this veil of ignorance came over the infinite. What is our Krishna in daily moments of confusion and sadness? What is it that we can hang on to in the current of life for direction? For a spiritual seeker, the Krishna is one's own chosen deity, Ishta. So whichever is the focus of our spiritual life, because the divine is one, but we might feel connected to the divine in many different ways. That is why it's a good thing that we have a choice. We could think in terms of the divine in some specific forms or names might connect us. We feel connected through God through them. That is why people meditate on prophets or incarnations or avatars or on saints. Or the object of our meditation can be formless. There are both kinds of meditations are possible. So whichever of these ways we conceive of the infinite, that becomes our Krishna, that becomes our guide. And then when the mind becomes purified, when the mind acquires that clarity, then our own heart, our own mind becomes our own Krishna. And in between these two, if we have a guru or a teacher, then teacher becomes our guide. So there is this God as the guide, then our teacher as the guide, and eventually when we acquire a measure of spiritual maturity, our own mind becomes our guide. So there are all these different roles are played at different points in our spiritual journey. So what is it in Karma Yoga? What is it that we offer to God? Is it just the fruits of work, the experience, or the work itself? There is any number of ways it can be done. There is no just one answer to this. Some people might offer the results of work. Some people offer the work itself. Some people can offer whatever the outcome of it's up to the person. And although sometimes some books will go into the technicalities about it, they're offering this or that, eventually it just left to the devotee, to the person, the karma yogi. The final goal in all of this is the removal of the ego. The sense of ego as the doer and the ego as the experiencer, karta and bhokta. These two things have to go. And whatever it is that will help me eliminate this role of this unripe ego in my life, I should do that. Is my conscience the same thing as my mind as a friend? How can I know that my conscience is guiding me in the right direction? Yes, you could say that. How do I know when my mind becomes my friend? Spiritual life is a series of awakenings. And at some stage, that the first real awakening, in some sense you could say, is that the mind becomes alert. That's the awakening when this ordinary intellect, which may do wonders in our day-to-day life, begin shining at the dhi, the refined power of spiritual intuition. That's the dhi that is mentioned in the Gayatri prayer. Dhiyo yonaf prachodayat. So the prayer, the Gayatri mantra, the Gayatri prayer is really a prayer to refine this intellect. The intellect which has kind of become contaminated with these desires and attachments, when that is refined, then that becomes a mind as a friend. Then that becomes a guide whose judgment we can rely on. Rama is described in the Valmiki Ramayana as the sthana krodha. How does one understand this in light of the teaching of Gita where anger is a trait to be rid of? I don't know about this sthana krodha. So, if you can at some point let me know what I haven't studied the Valmiki Ramayana fully myself, and I have not heard of this sthana krodha. So I am sorry I cannot answer this question. We do things mechanically, but even when we want to do them with awareness, we are unable to do so. Is this due to inadequate intensity of our desire? I think it's also a weak willpower. Because if I want to do something, and if I am aware that it's right, then merely good intention is not enough. There has to be fuel. It's like if I'm in the car and I have a good intention, I say, I want to go to a certain place, but the car tank must be filled with gas. If there is no gas, then merely my intention will not help. So even if I want to do something right, what gives me the power to actually implement that desire, to go ahead and do it, is a power of the will. And when the willpower is weak, then sometimes even when we want to do something, we are unable to do it. So I think strengthening of the willpower is as important as purification of the heart. Is there a way to not store the trash in the mind and get rid of it immediately? Sort of like the paper shredder getting rid of junk? I wish there was an easy way to do it. One easy way, if you want to think of it easy, is get the knowledge of Brahman. So as the Gita will point out, just as fire reduces everything to ashes, the knowledge of God, the knowledge of Brahman, self-knowledge, will burn all karma, all entire trash. And from that highest standpoint, everything other than Brahman is trash. Everything will be burnt. The whole problem will be resolved. But short of that, there is no quick fix way to remove it. It needs a lot of patience. First, we need to identify what is trash, what is not trash. Make use of what is not trash then to eliminate the trash one by one. And we can, if we keep on doing it, eventually, either it's God's grace or the light of knowledge, the fire of knowledge will come and burn the whole thing. So I hesitate to say that it's going to take a long time, because who knows? Through God's grace, it can go right now. So it's better not to think in terms of time, but the willingness to do whatever it takes to remove the trash from our mind. That's important. What is the difference between desire and samskara? Samskaras lead to desire, so they are connected. Samskaras, you could say, is the seed form of desire. Samskara are the seed. And then once they get triggered by some factor, some stimulant, either internal or external, then that samskara comes up in the form of desire. And a simple example would be, like if you have, say, you enjoy drinking Starbucks coffee. So you have a lot of coffee samskaras in your mind. And then once when you're going for a walk, you suddenly pass by a Starbucks store. Now that external perception, that stimulus of just seeing a Starbucks in front of you will awaken that samskara, that seed, and then produce a desire to go and drink coffee. Now, so that desire even when that desire comes, you still have the freedom to say no to it and continue walking. But if you give in to the desire and say, okay, and then you start walking towards the Starbucks store, then that desire has gotten converted into what is called intention. In Sanskrit, that's called sankalpa. And then when you actually go inside and order yourself a latte or whatever and start drinking it, then it has resulted to action. So samskara leads to desire, which might produce intention, and then finally action. And once you start sipping that coffee and you feel happy, then you've already got the fruits of that action as well. So that's the chain. Samskara, desire or vasana, sankalpa, kriya or karma, and karma phala. That's the way. Yes, clearly. The question is, as there is a conflict between our good and bad minds, does that prove that I is not the mind, or I or Atman is something different from the mind? Actually, I or Atman is not the right way to say, because I is really the ego. Atman is the real me. So, Atman doesn't even have that sense of I-ness, because Atman is infinite. The moment you think of I, you're thinking about not I. So both the idea of I is also part of the mind. That's called ahankara. And so yes, and if there are mind, then the internal divisions of the mind, some mind is alert, a part of the mind is not alert, and so on. But the Atman is different from all of these. But it's this alert mind that will remove the contaminations from the rest of the mind. And when the full mind becomes alert, it points the way to the Atman. That doesn't make the mind the Atman, but it points the way. And then it's just like when you send the rockets. So after some time, after the first or second leg, the fuel, that which fuels it, that which sends it, those fall off. But only then the payload or the satellite, that's what remains. So the mind is a little bit like an alert mind can take and remove the other portions, and then the truth alone remains. In verse 340, Krishna says that the abodes of desire are the senses, mind, and intellect. How can we think about these various abodes of desire? Clearly, all of the attachment that comes to the mind, when it is, first of all, even for the attachment to come, it's the senses. Through the senses we are taking in the external world, which is how, and through the senses and the mind we react to it. And then for the action, the kriya part of it, both the body, mind, and everything are involved. So this entire enterprise of desire converted into action and the results of it, all the three, the senses, the mind, the body, all of them are participants in this. And that's what is intended here. And that's why they are called the different abodes of desire, because they participate in this whole enterprise. I was having this conversation with my son, who is 9 years old, about how everyone is only an instrument of the Lord and that everything happens according to God's will. He asked me, what about murderers and other bad things people do? What would be a good response to his question? Everything happens to God's will means that nothing happens. Okay, let me put it this way. God's will is like the light of the sun. Nowadays, of course, we have other ways of illuminating a room. But say, even without electricity, if there were no electricity, no other source of light, then we would all be dependent on only the sun. Now, in the light of the sun, in order to see, we will need the sun. Without the presence of the sun, we cannot see. Now, in the light of the sun, good things can be done, bad things can be done. Who is responsible for the good things and the bad things? Not the sun. The sun is detached, but sun makes all these things possible, but is not responsible for them. If I do something good, the one who is doing that good is the one who is responsible for it. In murderers and killers, as you say, they are responsible for it. So not. So when we say that everything happened by God's will, what is meant is God's will makes everything possible. But that doesn't make God responsible. I mean, why do people ask only about murderers? Even good things, God is not responsible. And this is going to sound terrible, but God is not responsible for the good things that you do. God is not responsible for the bad things that you do. Your good things are yours, your bad things are yours. God is not involved, which sounds bad, I know. But that's what Krishna says in the Gita. He says that I take neither people's good actions nor bad actions. He says everyone has this sense of I, everyone has a sense of agency, and they do everything. So God is not responsible for everything, but it's the presence of God that makes everything possible. Are desires in themselves the problem, or is it the intensity of desires? If I desire an ice cream but not get upset if I don't get it, isn't it okay? By not having that desire at all, wouldn't I become more like a wall? Well, if I desire an ice cream and I don't get it and I don't get upset, well, that's fine. A wall doesn't. By not having a desire means it no longer holds any value for me. So that doesn't mean that someone offers you an ice cream, you're going to refuse it. But if I desire something and if I don't get it, I may not start crying. But if there is really desire, then it is going to be some amount of disappointment, maybe very negligible, but it is going to be there. So that's the answer. That's the answer. Is this a good way of dealing with desire, anger, and worldly pleasures? By asking, what would God do when faced with a similar situation? In fact, this is something that has been used in many different traditions. You might have seen sometimes some posters saying, what would Jesus do? And I think, or what would Buddha do? Or what would Ramakrishna do? I think that's a good way to ask. And that might help in choosing what is right or wrong, provided, again, any of these techniques are great, provided our mind becomes our friend. Because if the mind is not the friend, then I can ask that question, well, what would God do? It's like, think about it this way. If I badly want to go and eat an ice cream, and I say, I'm going to follow this technique, what would God do? And if I want it, I'm going to say, well, if God saw an ice cream, God would go and eat it. Okay, so I'm also going and eating it. So you see, because every technique, whichever technique we have, finally it's going to be implemented by the mind. And if the mind is playing tricks, then no technique will work. So it's not just about a technique. It's about what kind of mind we are using to implement that technique. How do we make God stick into our hearts? It feels that we can bring God in temporarily. How do we make it stick permanently? I think let's bring God in temporarily more often. So if I can bring God, say when I'm doing my meditation, I'm doing japa, and I can intensely feel the presence of my chosen deity, whichever way I think of God. say even for 5 seconds in my heart, I think that's great. It's better than not being able to do it at all. Now, if I can feel the presence of God for 5 seconds, it's a very hopeful sign that I can say, well, every time I sit for meditation, I'm going to have my 5 seconds time with God, in actual presence of God. Feel God actually present in my heart. And if I keep doing that day after day after day, maybe I might be able to increase it to 10 seconds. Or I might be able to have those 5 seconds more often. So we just keep on increasing that duration, increasing the frequency of it. So that's the way to do it. And of course, we need a lot of patience, and through prayer, through God's grace, it can become. Then we should make our heart so pure, so good, so comfortable that God would not want to go away. Think about it this way. If a guest visits you at home and you make that guest feel so comfortable, so welcome, and the guest says, I'm not going, I'm staying here. On the other hand, if someone comes to your home and you make it so difficult for that person says, I'm leaving right now. Now think about it this way. When we are praying, when we are meditating, we are welcoming the divine guest, welcoming God in our heart. Now, in the heart, if we have not made space in the heart that is welcoming, that is warm, that is great, and God enjoys it, God will say, you know what, I'm just going to stay there. But if my heart is already filled with too many things, and I tell God, come, but you're barely standing room. I'm sorry, I cannot offer you a chair because all these other things are piled up on it. And you just keep on standing. Then that's difficult. So that's why let us make our heart cleaner, warm, fresher. Anything that would kind of keep God from going away. That's the way to do it. How does one obtain a steady mind? We just have to pray and live according to dharma. The more we follow dharma, the mind becomes more steady. Ramakrishna said the gist of Gita is Tyaga. So why it has to be such a big book with so much of explanation? Big book? Oh, come on. And this book is with translation, not that big. And if you don't need a translation, it's even thinner. You should see some other books. If you look at Brahma Sutras and the Brihadaranyaka, compared to that, the Gita is pretty small. So, no, I don't agree. It's not a big book. Swamiji, sometimes we do things out of fear. Can you please talk about how fear fits in with Kama and Krodha? Thank you. So, fear is an offshoot of me forgetting myself. When I'm the only being that exists, there is no fear in the heart. In the deep sleep, in Sushupti, when we are not even dreaming, nothing exists apart from me, and no one experiences fear in the heart. Sometimes we might experience fear in dreams. We experience fear in the waking state. So our limitedness is the cause of fear. And the Gita teaching will show in many different ways how that fear can be removed. For a bhakta, reminding themselves that God is always with them also can remove all fear. It's like a child who is with their parents. As long as the dad and mom are holding the child's hand, the child is not afraid of anything. So if a bhakta remembers, if a devotee remembers that I'm always in the hands of God, then all fear will go. How do we find the space between samskara and sankalpa, attaching the will to it? When do we find the space? How can the will remain strong? Where does it find support as the desire pulls? Well, willpower is the whole thing. If the desire comes up in the heart, if the will goes and grasps it, and then that's how sankalpa occurs, and that's how then it leads to action. And strengthening of the will can occur through what the Chandogya Upanishads say, ahara shuddhi, purification of the food, which not only means the food that we eat every day, but also food for the mind. The kind of thoughts I put in my mind, the kind of images and sensory inputs that go in, if all those are positive, healthy and strong, then there is good, healthy food for the body and the mind. And when that becomes strong, the willpower also becomes strong. In cleaning out or confronting the mind's basement, various therapeutic methods occur in a modern society. Many believe the plant, I don't know how to pronounce that, ayahuasca, I'm not sure of that pronunciation, helps in this endeavor. Your opinion? Well, I'm not aware of this plant, and if any therapeutic methods occur in modern society and if they can really help, that's great. I mean, I am not to say it one way or the other. If it is helpful, that's great. If it is not helpful, then there are always many other methods available as well. Is there a righteous anger? Well, it depends on what you mean by righteous anger. Because, I mean, anger as a strategy, I can understand. Sometimes when parents are dealing with their children or teachers with their students, and if some students or some children may not understand if something is told to them affectionately or gently, and then sometimes if someone is told, you tell someone, make a show of anger and tell them sternly, it might be effective. So when anger is used in this way, it is done for the good of the child or the student. And therefore, the one who is doing it is not really angry, but is using anger as a way to get a right thing done by someone under their charge. So that kind of an anger is understandable. Otherwise, anger in any form, I think, is always going to create trouble. Because whatever righteous anger is going to accomplish can be accomplished without getting angry. That's how I see it. Okay, so we have come to the end of the questions. Thank you again for very good questions, and we will continue this study. Next Sunday, it's Guru Purnima. So instead of the Gita, next Sunday we will have a short worship of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother and Swamiji, and then a brief reflection on the role of Guru in spiritual life. And then on a Sunday after that, we will resume our study of the Gita. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.